Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the NatureCity podcast. I'm your host, Carl Perdelli. And if you haven't been here before, I'm also the CEO and co-founder of the company, having started NatureCity over 20 years ago with my wife, Beth. And since then, it's been our privilege to serve over 500,000 Americans by offering them the best supplements we can make. So about 2.5 years ago, Dr. Karen Hecht and I recorded an episode on Astaxanthin, doing a deep dive in Astaxanthin, one of nature's most powerful antioxidants and one of my favorite supplements, by the way. And that was episode 9, Karen. That was one of the first episodes in the history of the NatureCity podcast, but it went on to be one of the most popular and most watched episodes ever. Anyone who wants to learn about Astaxanthin seems to tune into that particular podcast. So it's been a couple of years, and since there's been a lot of new science and new perspectives and findings on Astaxanthin, we thought it was time for an update. So please welcome back Dr. Karen Hecht, who is the Vice President of Science at AstaReal. AstaReal being the company that candidly put Astaxanthin on the map over the last 30 to 40 years. Karen, good to see you.
Good to see you, Carl. Thank you for inviting me back. I'm so excited to hear that your audience has been receptive to Astaxanthin. I'm excited to talk about all the updates.
Absolutely. And Karen didn't come alone this time. She brought a colleague that we're thrilled to also have join us today, Dr. Susan Emrahi, who leads scientific communications at AstaReal and also brings a practitioner perspective to complement Karen's biology and scientific perspective. So we got a full team here. Great. Really looking forward to this. Thank you both for joining. Susan, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for the invitation to join you.
So Karen, a lot of people watched our last episode, but not everybody. So for those who aren't familiar with Astaxanthin, maybe just spend a minute explaining what it is, why it's so unique, and why it can be valuable to our health, either acquired through diet or consumed as a supplement.
So if you haven't heard of Astaxanthin, you may have seen it on your plate at some point. Astaxanthin is an antioxidant member of the carotenoid family, and carotenoids are the yellows, oranges, and reds that you find in your food, primarily in fruits and vegetables. So you might think of beta-carotene in carrots, lycopene in tomatoes, but while we get most of the carotenoids in our diet from fruits and vegetables, astaxanthin is not found in any edible terrestrial plants. And so we would have to turn to the red in lobster or salmon or prawn or crab. You would find it in red-colored seafood. So astaxanthin is the red carotenoid that contributes that pigment, the red color, to those foods. And the best source in our diet is from sockeye salmon, wild sockeye salmon at that. So that's where astaxanthin is found on our plates.
Now, it's a very important distinction because a lot of the farm-raised salmon really has a synthetic version, I think, of astaxanthin to create that color. Is that still the case?
That is still the case, and most of us consume primarily farmed salmon. Just on the market is what's more available. So when you're choosing wild salmon, you are getting a natural form of astaxanthin that makes its way through the food chain up to the salmon's diet. And when we're talking about supplementation, we're also talking about this natural form that in our case, it does not come from salmon. Rather, it comes from a naturally occurring algae called Hematococcus pluvialis. And it makes the same form or type of astaxanthin that you would find in the wild sockeye salmon as opposed to the farmed.
Sure, makes sense. And as I mentioned, it's one of the most powerful antioxidants in nature. What makes it so unique and powerful?
So astaxanthin is a really unique structure that allows it to span the membrane, the full thickness of the cell membrane. It's long enough to do this. It's also got the kind of architecture that matches the cell membrane, which means it has these oxygens on the ends, on either end of the molecule. So if you picture kind of like a dumbbell structure, on the ends, you've got those oxygens that do the free radical quenching. Those are the business ends of astaxanthin. And in terms of its in vitro power to quench free radicals, there is a study that did a direct comparison with other antioxidants and found that astaxanthin was number one in terms of quenching singlet oxygen, and it was even 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C in this capacity in this experiment. And I frame it that way because a lot of people are very familiar with vitamin C as an antioxidant. It's probably the most commonly used antioxidant in supplements today. And so just as in context, of course, astaxanthin does not replace vitamin C as an antioxidant, which is an essential nutrient for us, but just to give you a sense of how powerful it is at neutralizing free radicals.
Absolutely. And Susan, I don't know if you want to add to that, just from a practitioner perspective, why would you recommend to your peers that they consider astaxanthin for their patients?
Yes, absolutely. Astaxanthin is one of my favorite nutrients as well. As Karen said, it has this superpower as its structure, and how that applies to us every single day is that we have these cells called mitochondria. I think mitochondria has become kind of a buzzword in nutrients and supplementation these days. And mitochondria are responsible for producing the energy in our cells. So they're little powerhouses that help us create energy for our everyday life. And astaxanthin is considered a mitochondrial nutrient. So if you think about nourishing your mitochondria, that allows you to produce your energy for any age. So it doesn't matter, even if you're just the common person, it's going to help you produce your energy more efficiently, and therefore helping your body to maintain its energy levels and being able to fuel and go on about your day in a much more efficient manner.
No, it's very well said. One of my favorite things about astaxanthin really is its versatility, right? Being able to, it's an oil, right? So it's fat soluble, like a vitamin E, for example. However, it also can work on the cellular level. It also could work in the water kind of soluble parts of cells also, which really, there aren't too many antioxidants that really can do that. Is that right, Karen?
Yeah, so you're referencing the fact that because astaxanthin spans the full membrane thickness, it's able to quench free radicals on either side of the membrane periphery as well as inside the membrane. So that is quite unique. You mentioned vitamin E. Vitamin E is a fat-loving or lipophilic antioxidant, but it's actually too short to span the full membrane thickness. So that means it's a little maybe spatially more limited in terms of how far it can reach and the free radicals it's able to quench. There's one other thing that's really interesting about astaxanthin as compared to vitamin E, for example, is that when we have really high levels of free radicals that we're asking these antioxidants to quench for us, some of them will give away their electrons and eventually run out and turn into pro-oxidants. Vitamin E and vitamin C are examples of such antioxidants that are known to do this, but astaxanthin has a different quenching mechanism that allows it to share its electrons rather than give them away. And so if it relies more on this mechanism, it's known as a pure antioxidant, meaning it doesn't itself become a pro-oxidant the way some other antioxidants might do under certain conditions.
No, it makes sense. And the other thing I like too is, of course, there's different types of free radicals, right? Different classes of free radicals. And, astaxanthin can help neutralize or quench, free radical activity in a lot of different, varieties of free radicals, which, again, just makes it very valuable to our health. And probably one of the reasons why it can do so much, I would assume. Is that fair?
Yeah, I just want to say that as the owner of the company, the depth of your knowledge is really impressive. I think it's amazing how much you know about the ingredients that you're selling and recommending to people. I think this level of knowledge about astaxanthin is quite rare, and I feel like you're an amazing collaborator here and colleague for me. But yes, you're absolutely right. So astaxanthin is really good at quenching singlet oxygen and superoxide in particular, but it's also able to quench other types of free radical, peroxyl type radicals, primarily reactive oxygen species, but there's also some evidence that it's able to quench some reactive nitrogen species, although that's not really where its strength is necessarily. And that's why, when we think of antioxidants overall, we want to get a nice variety because they do have different fingerprints or different personalities. Perhaps they're found in different parts of the cell, or they have a preference for quenching different types of free radicals. And then the other thing that I would love to share with everyone is that although we're talking about this direct free radical quenching activity, astaxanthin and other antioxidants do more than that in the cell. And so they interact with different genes and promote increased expressions of our own endogenous antioxidants. So we call that indirect antioxidant activity. And we've seen the way that astaxanthin actually helps to promote mitochondrial biogenesis as well, meaning making more mitochondria. So that's there are different mechanisms of action beyond just the going in and neutralizing a free radical.
That's a great point. Great point. And Susan, as you know, not all astaxanthin is the same. And at NatureCity, we certainly always want to use the premium forms of different nutrients for our supplements. And we think AstaReal is certainly the premier form when it comes to astaxanthin. What are some of the things about that really stand out for you in terms of the quality and why it really has become a market leader?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And again, I have to echo Karen's comments about NatureCity and your diligence in utilizing ingredients that really have done their homework on the research and the data. So at AstaReal, we have over 85 human clinical studies researching astaxanthin and its impacts, as Karen mentioned, on many of the mechanisms of action in the body and why it is so beneficial for us to utilize and get and supplement in a daily way. We have a diet gap because no one's eating all of that salmon every single day to ensure that we're getting proper amounts of astaxanthin for our bodies to utilize. And I think AstaReal, of course I'm biased, does such a great diligence and a great service to our partners and hopefully the end users. To my colleagues, as a practitioner, that would be my number one reason is there research to support what you're recommending? And is that recommendation going to fulfill the needs of that patient? So it's always about, the proof is in the pudding. And so we like to make sure that our research and our data behind the ingredient, there is proof in that pudding and what the claims that we're substantiating and you're able to substantiate are really backed by true science.
No, well said. Well said. And, and the quality and the way you make your product too is top notch, which is very important. Safety is as important as efficacy for, all our clients and ourselves too, as users of the products. So, you mentioned, the science, and there's so many great things or great ways in how astaxanthin can help our bodies. And we'll start getting into some of the newer findings in a moment. But I'd like to start with some of the core benefits users may experience with astaxanthin and AstaReal. And I'd like to start with my favorite, which is vision health, right? Particularly how it can help with eye fatigue and tired eyes. We all spend all day looking at these screens, and it has a big effect and impact on our eyes. I don't, ladies, maybe Susan, you want to start with this one? I think you have a little background in vision. Maybe we could start there. And Karen, you're welcome to follow up, please.
Thank you. Yes, eyes are near and dear. I did do a lot of work in ophthalmology and working with ophthalmologists to make recommendations for eye health. As we know from the age-related eye disease study, which has, been out probably almost 20 years now, that there are specific carotenoids that are very beneficial to the eyes, and as well as Carl, with your formulations as well. And what we know about astaxanthin is that while it is a carotenoid for the body, it also has incredible benefits for the eyes in a lot of different ways. Two of my favorites, which I'll mention, and then Karen, I'm sure you have some additions there, but as I mentioned earlier, mitochondria are energy centers. Our vision takes up an incredible amount of energy just to function properly every single day. Like our brain, our eyes are truly an extension of our brains, and we can process up to about 36,000 bits of information every hour that just our eyes are intaking. And there's about 100 million cells that are light sensitive in our eyes. So that's a lot of demand on our body. And with all of that energy and that demand and that light, also comes some oxidative stress. So some reactive oxygen species and oxidation. So astaxanthin helps the eyes to fight that and maintain a good balance of energy so your eyes don't feel fatigued. Secondly, we've done quite a bit of research with accommodation. And what visual accommodation is we think of it as that near and far distance vision. So we're all just inundated with screen, right? The digital age is upon us, and we are all looking at these screens every single day for hours on end. And the eye's ability to fluctuate between near and far, it involves a body of muscles called the ciliary muscles, and they help control your lens to go from near to far and near to far. And as our eyes fatigue, we don't do that so readily available. And that's when we start to get some blurred vision or some other symptoms of computer vision syndrome that we probably all experience and don't even realize that we're experiencing that. The blinking or, stiff back, stiff neck, all are downstream effects of that. And astaxanthin, just like it helps the salmon, when they first started to research astaxanthin in salmon, they were looking at salmon in their muscle and the protection that astaxanthin provides that salmon in the musculature. And that also translates to us. So we as humans also utilize that benefit in the muscle. And the ciliary muscles in the eye is one of those areas that we do benefit from to help with that accommodation and help maintain and even we have research that Karen, I'm sure you can speak of in adults and now in children to help with the symptoms of computer vision syndrome and accommodation.
Karen, you want to pick up from there?
Absolutely. So I think that one of the things Susan touched on earlier is that there are a number of carotenoids that are quite well known to support vision. What's interesting is that astaxanthin brings a complementary function. So when we think of lutein and zeaxanthin, we're thinking of their benefits in the back of the eye and the retina to filter out blue light and support contrast sensitivity, among other things. Whereas astaxanthin is found at the front of the eye in that ciliary body, which are the muscles framing the lens at the front of the eye, to help support mitochondrial function, accommodative function. And what's interesting is that in addition to influencing objective measures of accommodation, so our range of focus, our near point of focus, we also in the studies see that it actually impacts subjective symptoms. So things that people actually report feeling, eye strain, eye fatigue, in some cases headaches, also a secondary symptom of computer vision syndrome. And so I think it's interesting for us to note these things in our own experience as we're trying out astaxanthin and supplementing. How are we feeling anything different? Because so many times when we supplement, it's an understanding that it's providing some benefit that we may not feel, but perhaps we're able to measure. Like with the lutein and zeaxanthin, you can measure your macular pigment, optical density, if you go to the doctor. But it's nice to also have something that you can feel is making a difference as well.
Yeah. So both of you touched on, again, what I just love about astaxanthin, how it works in the front of the eye. And for those in the audience of us who are just mere mortals and not doctors, let me see if I can paint this picture for us. So your eyes have a lens, of course, which has to flex depending on whether you're looking at something close up or far away. Okay. And these ciliary muscles control the flexing of the lens, right? So it's very easy on the eye and the muscles when you're looking at something far away because your lens flattens out and the muscles don't have to do too much work, right? The real challenge, and this gets back into the computer and screen thing, the real challenge is when you're looking at something up close and for you able to see that, the ciliary muscles have to pull back on that lens and flex it so you could see what you're looking at. Now, if you could picture almost you're at the gym and you kind of like are now pulling down on weights or something like that, and you got to hold them all day. That's what your ciliary muscles are doing for big parts of the day, because they got to flex that lens while we're staring at our computers and screens all day. And I'm as guilty as anybody. I spend way too much time looking at screens. But that creates a lot of work on the eyes. And this is where astaxanthin, I think, comes in to help those ciliary muscles function better, so your eyes do feel less fatigued, less strained, and so on and so forth. Is that the right description or how to frame it?
Yeah, great explanation. I think it's like when you're looking at a screen for prolonged periods of time, it's like you're holding this isometric contraction. Think like arm circles forever, basically, right? And so your eyes definitely get tired, and that's where that temporary blurred vision and eye strain, it comes partly from those muscles getting tired from being contracted for so long.
Yeah, and Karen, in the studies, how long does it typically take to start seeing some benefits from astaxanthin?
Most of the studies, we see statistically significant results within 4 weeks for vision in particular. And the minimum dose where we see an effect for vision is 4 milligrams a day.
Perfect. All right, let's switch to something, another benefit of astaxanthin that's getting a lot of attention these days, and that's the appearance of the skin, which is really becoming an area that's growing for people of all ages, both younger and older. All of us here fall into the younger part of that spectrum. So how does astaxanthin help keep the skin looking more youthful?
Yes, so astaxanthin is actually found in all of the skin layers. And that helps to have a supplement that's able to access different parts of the skin that have different functions. So if you can imagine, in the deepest layer of skin, in the hypodermis, there's a lot of blood flow that needs to bring in oxygen and nutrients to help those cells regenerate. Every 28 days, we get a new layer at the surface. And so think about how much nutrition that requires. So we have seen in several studies that astaxanthin supports capillary and peripheral blood flow, as well as blood flow in the back of the eye and the retina. So helping to nutrify all the tissues of the body. And then in the dermis, which is the next layer up, we have fibroblasts, which are these amazing cell factories that create many structures like elastin and collagen, famously, and hyaluronic acid, all responsible for maintaining the elasticity, tensile strength, and hydration of our skin. So astaxanthin helps to support the health of those cells, which means we're helping to maintain our basically collagen factories and collagen bank. In addition to that, astaxanthin protects the collagen network itself because it can become damaged through oxidation as well. And so your existing collagen network is facilitated by that. And then lastly, there's the topmost layer of skin, the epidermis, and then the stratum corneum. So in the stratum corneum is something I can touch on. It's basically this brick and mortar structure is what you can think of it. You've got your corneocytes, and then around the corneocytes, the mortar, are all these really sensitive, wonderful lipids. And their role is to lock in the skin's moisture. And astaxanthin is very good at being in lipidy environments. That's the scientific term, lipidy. And it's able to protect those lipids. And so helping to promote our skin's ability to lock in moisture. So that's another way, in addition to supporting hyaluronic acid, that astaxanthin can help to promote skin hydration.
That's very well said. Susan, is there anything you'd like to add to that in terms of skin health?
Wow, Karen really covered it all in that regard. I do want to mention that in 2023 or 2024, the American Academy of Dermatology did a big, broad view of all of the research and data on ingredients that they felt were beneficial for skin health. And the number one ingredient they found was collagen. And the number two ingredient they found was astaxanthin. And these two ingredients, based on their criteria, which was how much research did they do to support the use of these two nutrients and many others, they looked at hundreds of ingredients that would support the skin. Number three was omega-3s. So interestingly enough, it was collagen, astaxanthin, and omega-3s. So there's a lot of research and data behind that to substantiate the use of astaxanthin for the skin.
Small details that was published in a meeting in the annual conference of the American Academy of Dermatology, but the work was not done by the American Academy of Dermatology per se. It was a research group that then this was presented as part of the annual meeting. But it was a really important finding and meta-analysis looking at the strength of the evidence for all of these different skin ingredients.
Oh, absolutely. And, what's nice about what you both described is, again, illustrates that versatility of the astaxanthin molecule itself, right? You mentioned the outer layers of the skin where it can work in the fat environment, like with a vitamin E, to help protect against stressors that are attacking the skin, right? And then it can go down deeper into the layers where it might assist vitamin C in helping protect things, like you said, the fibroblasts, I guess it was, the fibroblasts, which really produce the collagen, elastin, and then there's also hyaluronic acid too. And it happens in deeper layers of the skin. Not too many, not too many nutrients are going to be able to really scale the full, all three layers of the skin and add important value. Which again just illustrates why I think astaxanthin is just something that should be part of everyone's day.
I agree. Based on the data with no bias. And of course, the thing is that in my role, it's really important that as we think of astaxanthin innovation, we're always led by the data and the evidence. And so that's my main consideration. And then, of course, we also want to make sure that we make an impact in an area that matters to people, that is solving everyday problems and matters of public health. So, of course, this is why it's kudos to the company for really focusing on innovation and research and investing so much. It's not so common these days. It's a little bit more common to find ingredient manufacturers that do invest in science, and those are typically branded ingredients. But that's a relatively new method of doing business. And so I think it is quite unique that right from the very start, now 37 years ago, there was a big focus with this company in investing in the science. And so everything that we're speaking about today comes from research and collaboration with researchers and following the evidence and strengthening a foundation that's led by data. So I think that that's something that we really have to respect. And one other thing about skin, if I can just add, is that, some people apply astaxanthin topically too. And I often get asked, why, if we're taking it internally, is there any benefit to a topical application? One thing I can point to is that while we ingest astaxanthin, and it is found in all layers of skin, there is a bit of a gradient. So we do find a higher concentration in the deeper layers of skin, and as it travels outward, the concentration is less in the top layer. So while topical applications won't penetrate the skin, really, not anything beyond the stratum corneum, you may want to, have a targeted application topically. That's something some people like to see. So that's another consideration. And one other thing, we talked about astaxanthin not being only a direct antioxidant. So how important it is to have astaxanthin physically present in all the skin layers, it's not entirely clear. Because if you're taking astaxanthin, it's not only going to be found in skin. It's got these whole body benefits, and it's boosting your own endogenous antioxidant system. And so what's that doing to your skin health overall? So let's think about it more holistically and not just, where is it physically in the skin and which layer and what's it doing directly, because there are a lot of indirect benefits as well.
No question. And we're going to talk about maybe something else along those lines next. I'd like to transition to how astaxanthin can help with muscle endurance and recovery, which may be a nice segue into some of the more recent work that you have been doing at the company. And when we get into this topic, it really, a lot of people are introduced to astaxanthin through salmon, right? It's the most obvious answer or most obvious part of our diet where we can consume astaxanthin. And, as the legend goes, I don't think it's legend, I think it's real. Astaxanthin is a very important part of the salmon species actually surviving because it helped give it really the endurance to make that journey upstream, which could be up to 900 miles, I think, swimming upstream to where the salmon then spawn, right? And very important, obviously, for the sustainability of the species. I had some Weisenheimer say, yeah, so astaxanthin's so great, salmon swim all this way, but they die. I'm like, yeah, but it also promotes this. There's always someone who's a wise guy, right? But,
But it's not just about the self, because the astaxanthin gets passed on to the salmon eggs. That's why salmon eggs have that color. And that helps the future generations survive because they lay those eggs in really shallow streams, right? And it's fully saturated by UV, which causes oxidative stress. And without that antioxidant protection, those fry would never survive. And so that's part of the secret of astaxanthin protecting the lipids that those developing fish are depending on for nutrition and development and growth, right? So, yeah.
And I have to add to that, those salmon swim that 900-mile journey without eating. So the astaxanthin is protecting their fat stores and their energy production on that swim.
There you go. So if that gentleman's listening today, now you have a good answer from two professionals. So, all right. Well, look, let's now just talk a little bit more about, muscle endurance and recovery and how, the role of astaxanthin. I'll toss to any one of you who wants to begin.
I love this topic, and it's definitely been an area of focus for us in the last few years. So we've been very fortunate to collaborate with a lot of excellent researchers in this space, Dr. Kreider, Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Waldman, to name a few. And they have been building on a foundation of what we understand about astaxanthin working in the mitochondria to support mitochondrial health, substrate utilization, endurance, and recovery. So there was a lot of data actually from the early to mid 2000s that supported the function of astaxanthin for endurance athletes. There were studies in soccer players showing that it reduced muscle damage markers throughout a training period and reduced systemic inflammation markers, C-reactive protein. There were studies in cyclists showing it increased power output and the time to complete a 20-kilometer time trial. What we didn't have a lot of information on is resistance-trained athletes and looking at recovery. So there's a connection that you can think of, which is astaxanthin quenches free radicals. Free radicals are part of what's contributing to muscle damage from exercise and exercise-induced inflammation, which leads to soreness and slower recovery times. So what we knew is that astaxanthin reduced that systemic inflammation marker from exercise, CRP, and that it reduced muscle damage markers in soccer players. But actually, the early studies didn't show any benefit to resistance-trained athletes. So we decided to question this and see, is it just a different type of benefit that we need to look at? Because different populations have different redox balances, they have different performance goals, and so the mechanism of action may be different. Even the muscle composition between endurance and resistance-trained athletes is different. So what we found in our recent studies is that there is a benefit for resistance-trained athletes in terms of delayed onset muscle soreness. And we see that when they're doing leg presses, repeated leg presses with extended eccentric contractions. So the eccentric contraction is, think about the part of the bicep curl where you're letting that dumbbell down. Or downhill running, you would experience a lot of eccentric contraction, and that contributes to the most muscle damage and soreness. So that study was done by Dr. Gavin Barker and Dr. Hunter Waldman at the University of North Alabama. And they repeated the study in both men and women. And they found an impact on delayed onset muscle soreness in both cases. So now we have some sense that astaxanthin doesn't only impact endurance and performance in endurance trained athletes. Like runners and cyclists, but also potentially recovery in resistance trained athletes. And that is really important in cases where you have back-to-back training or, a lot of events that you're preparing for, and you need to be able to keep a consistent training, high volume schedule.
Absolutely. Susan, do you want to add to that?
Oh, wow. That was a lot. That's hard to follow. I think one of my favorite things about the muscle or the recovery with astaxanthin is that it doesn't, as Karen mentioned, in the endurance trained athletes, it was as little as 4 milligrams that made a difference. Even in the soccer players, to maintain their CRP levels, it did not. For the ones running, the soccer players, we looked at the baseline CRP, and then those that were supplementing with astaxanthin had a 0 increase in their CRP. So that systemic, as Karen said, marker of inflammation for those soccer players did not increase. So it did maintain that ability to quench the free radicals associated with the exercise-induced inflammation. So it's all about mobility, and it's all about, for practitioners, keeping their patients healthy and keeping your customers healthy and mobile and in the gym. So I think astaxanthin is definitely top on the list to be able to maintain that muscle performance, to keep everybody going every single day. So it's helping with that delayed onset soreness, or, that stiffness that potentially people don't stay in the gym. So
that's a good point, Susan, because not all of us are elite athletes. I'm not pointing at anyone here today, but actually Susan is a recreational athlete. And I think that it is worth mentioning and talking about, recreational athletes maintaining muscle and mobility as we enter new life stages. And also, what about untrained athletes, right? It's so demoralizing to go to the gym and try to make a change and then feel absolutely destroyed the second day and feeling like, how am I ever going to go back? So if there's a tool out there that can help to ease that and help maintain motivation, I think that can make an impact for everyone.
No, and that's exactly my favorite aspect of how astaxanthin can help here, because look, so much of staying active and getting results is consistency, right? And look, anytime you don't feel good or your body doesn't feel good, you're less likely to go back and do your exercises or whatever you have planned for the day in terms of activity. So recovery is very underrated, and especially as you get, I'm turning 60 this year, it gets harder and harder. It's not easy, right? And for the fact that I think you have data both on strength training as well as cardiovascular type of activity, and show benefits. I think is again just shows that versatility and how astaxanthin really can help in a lot of ways. So, I love that. Absolutely love it. So being a powerful antioxidant, you would think that astaxanthin could be a good ally to our immune system also. Is there any research out there that either of you find interesting with respect to astaxanthin and immune health?
I think so. I think there's an understanding that antioxidants can have an impact on immune cell health and supporting a healthy immune system. And there's certainly data with astaxanthin both in untrained and trained populations showing that it helps to, in soccer players, for example, maintain the secretory immune function throughout a prolonged period of training, which does introduce some physiological stress to the body. We do see in occupational and active firefighter participants in one study, in Dr. Gonzalez's study, that astaxanthin helped to actually reduce markers of physiological stress in response to a fire ground test, which is like a twice annual physical test of 9 different fire suppressing activities that they do. So helping to support physiological functions there. And then in untrained populations, we also see, again, it helps to maintain or increase immunoglobulin A in the saliva. Astaxanthin has been shown in untrained population to support both the adaptive and innate immune response. So in the adaptive immune response, we do see an improvement in T cell and B cell activity, and through the innate immune system, we see an increase in natural killer cell activity. So there are benefits. I would say that this is not maybe the strongest area of focus for research on astaxanthin, but there are some studies out there showing benefits from between 2 to 8 milligrams a day.
Excellent. Excellent. Is there anything you want to add to that, Susan, or?
No, I really don't. I think that really covers. I think the importance, as Karen mentioned, is the fact that it does kind of cover the whole spectrum of immunity with your innate and your adaptive immune systems. I think that's really powerful, and not every nutrient can make that claim.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we already talked about, the benefits of astaxanthin on vision health, what's connected to our eyes, but our brain, right? So a lot of times we see like lutein and the zeaxanthin isomers, we see benefits for both the eyes and perhaps in brain health or cognitive function. Is this an area where you think astaxanthin can also be helpful?
Absolutely. So astaxanthin does cross both the blood-retinal and the blood-brain barriers. And we do see existing studies already showing that astaxanthin improved reaction time to delayed recall tasks in middle-aged persons. There are some studies on individuals, so these were not healthy individuals. Strictly speaking, they were older individuals with mild cognitive impairment. Typically, these are not the types of studies that we like to use for support of supplements, because supplements are not intended to treat individuals with any kind of disease, right? So supplements are purely intended to support and maintain health in an already healthy population. But I think what's exciting is that this is an emerging area of research, and that there are studies coming out very soon in different populations, young healthy populations, as well as middle-aged healthy populations, where we have seen improvements in cognitive functions, and particularly in executive cognitive functions. So that means more complex tasks that require planning and in some cases spatial reasoning. And I can speak to maybe some of the possibly what the mechanism of action could be based on a preclinical study that was done in mice. And in that study, they looked at what's called adult hippocampal neurogenesis. So the hippocampus is kind of like the gateway to memory and learning. And it used to be back in 2009, I mean, it's been a while, we used to think that adults couldn't really add new neurons to this part of the brain. That was it. Your learning was done. It turns out that's not the case. And it is possible to create new neurons, not just new neuronal pathways. And in this particular mouse study, what was observed is that supplementation with astaxanthin helped to promote that in mice and improved their learning behavior in a Morris water maze. So, of course, we don't use animal studies to support any kind of claims in humans for supplements, but there are studies like the Hongo study, the Katagiri study, that do show in humans that it had an impact. Astaxanthin alone in the Katagiri study or in combination with vitamin E in the Hongo study had an impact on mental fatigue and also their ability to conduct mental math and reaction time to various computer-based tasks. And there is a new study, Susan, you know that study with astaxanthin combining with grapeseed extract and a couple of other ingredients? Yeah, they looked at episodic memory and they saw an improvement there. And they also, it was called a everyday memory questionnaire. So they saw an improvement there, as well as an increase in brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which helps to support brain health and neurogenesis as well. So there are some indicators, and that was not astaxanthin alone, but it just adds to the evidence that there are indicators that astaxanthin may do quite quite a lot, and we do want to keep investigating that and keep an eye out. I'll send you those papers, Carl, when they're published.
Would love to see him. And when it comes to brain health, I mean, just so many different aspects of it, So it's kind of it's a very complicated topic, and you really have to drill down when you say it helps brain health. What does that mean, right? Because there's so many different ways. But I think I'm glad to see you guys are going to continue to invest there because I believe there's a lot of potential, and I can tell you, it's definitely, no pun intended, it's something that's on the mind of every, most of our clients. I mean, who was not worried about, about their brain, right? So, and how they're going to age and hopefully stay independent as well as mobile. So, great to hear that you guys are looking at that. But are any other studies or emerging areas of research with astaxanthin that, you're excited about or want to share?
We touched on the delayed onset muscle soreness study. So that was done on college-aged male athletes and also repeated in college-aged female athletes. So the new cognitive study that is coming out was done also in college-aged female athletes. And we just had a brand new study published looking at muscle stem cells. And I think the findings were quite interesting, showing that astaxanthin did have an impact on myogenicity of muscle stem cells. And that could have potential impact on muscle regeneration and recovery down the road. And this was specifically done in aged muscle. So you'll find it in Nature Aging in that journal. And the authors were Dr. Amrita Sahu and Dr. Zachary Clemens. So I encourage you to check that one out because I think that is an area where we'll see more coming out in terms of how is astaxanthin working in muscle tissue and muscle stem cells, and what does that mean for aging muscles and combining astaxanthin together with training. And so that's one area. Another area I'm excited for is we're working together with the International Society for Sports Nutrition, or ISSN, and they are really authoritative figures when it comes to putting forward guidelines for sports nutrition supplements and how sports nutrition professionals like dietitians, nutritionists, trainers, coaches should use and recommend to collegiate athletes and professional athletes. So I think that working with them, they're going to be coming out with some really interesting position stances that are going to talk about how these different nutrients should practically be utilized, and working with them to develop practical applications for astaxanthin that can be used in the field by athletes and by tactical athletes as well is going to be a really important growth area because we want to support these individuals. I think when we talked about the firefighter study, sometimes we think about firefighters in our own minds as being very well-trained and athletic individuals. And that's not always necessarily the case. They don't always receive the training. They're not always consistent. And so often you find these individuals who are volunteering their time, their safety for our benefit and for the community's benefit, but they don't always have the physical state to really put up with all the sleep stress, the physical stress, the mental stress, the environmental stress that they're facing. So anything we can do to support, especially their cardiovascular health, is something that is going to be of great importance. And we're going to develop more research in that field as well.
Exciting. So, Susan, I'll ask you this question, perhaps our last question. A lot of times we get the question, well, how much astaxanthin should I take daily? So what would you suggest?
Well, our research spans quite a broad area, anywhere from 4 milligrams, even 3 milligrams in some of the skin work, all the way up to 12 milligrams in some of the endurance and the resistant trained athletes. Personally, I take 12 milligrams of astaxanthin daily myself, but I would say it really depends on the person. Like, we're all just such different individuals, and it depends on what your goal is for your outcome, what your condition is yourself. I know we are hearing this term consistently in the journals about personalized supplementation and personalized programs. And that truly is where it is. It really is about you individually. I will say I usually recommend 12 milligrams a day for people, just because, and again, Karen mentioned it, in our jobs, in our, stressors in our life, our bodies are going through this, whether it's environmental or it's induced ourselves because we're exercising in a gym. There's a lot of stress in our day-to-day activities, and 12 milligrams seems to be a good area of making sure that you're going to get enough.
Karen, I just think Susan's trying to sell more astaxanthin for the company. What do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, I think she's a keeper. But it's to think about where you are in your balance. I would say if you're a very active athlete, if you're taking on a new event, if you're finally thinking about running that marathon that apparently everyone I know is now, not me, but everyone I know is striving to do a marathon at some point. Or if you're older, or if you're just in a particularly stressful life stage, then you may benefit from a higher dose. And the reason is that we're just trying to achieve a balance. So what is your level of oxidative stress? And that sort of dictates how much antioxidant you might want to consume. And, think about that through your diet as well, because we want to consume an antioxidant rich diet that has a lot of different types of antioxidants in there. So all the colorful fruits and vegetables. And then whatever you feel that you might have an insufficiency that is difficult to get from diet alone, like astaxanthin, in that case, you might want to reach for a dietary supplement. And I think that for maintenance, I would say 4 or 6 milligrams is sufficient. But again, if you are, looking ahead at some big event that you think is going to be rather stressful, or if you're older and your natural antioxidant capacity is maybe not what it used to be, then a higher dose like 12 milligrams is probably a good idea.
No, we recommend 6 to 12, depending on circumstances and personal needs, of course. We always try to guide people based on what's happening in their life as best we can. And of course, we always want you to share what you are taking, any supplements, with your practitioners to make sure it's appropriate for you as well, right?
Exactly. Yes. So it is a complementary tool in your toolkit, and always consult your health professional because they know the whole you, ideally, and what your needs are and how that's going to fit into your personalized health toolkit. So that's very important to take into consideration.
Well, guys, you've been both terrific. Thank you so much again for taking the time here. I think it's very valuable for all those listening. And again, I think we're coming up on, well, not quite 20 years, but it's been quite a while. We've been working together with AstaReal. Really enjoyed the relationship together. If viewers are interested in some astaxanthin products, you can check out NatureCity.com, our website. We have 2 options for you. You can go to our True Asta soft gels, just 6 milligrams of astaxanthin per soft gel. Again, you could decide whether to take 1 or 2 a day. And more recently, we introduced another product with AstaReal astaxanthin in an enhanced delivery system. So you can get the benefits of astaxanthin with only 3 milligrams, but the delivery system actually helps it improve the bioavailability, so it's closer to 6. And we had to do that because we need some more space in the capsule. That's our True New Grow Plus hair and skin formula. It's power packed. I think we got 10 different ingredients, Susan and Karen, with published research studies showing benefits for hair and skin. Really great formula that I think people are excited about, but that also has AstaReal astaxanthin in there. So check them out. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me. Both of you, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Carl. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
So that's it for this week's episode. Please like the episode if you did, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you won't miss future episodes of the NatureCity podcast. If you like to listen to your podcast, we're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That's it for this week. This is Carl Pardelli, and I'll see you next week.